Welcome to Urban Legend Crypto. This is Pedro Rachet and our co-host, Bret Jenny, and with a special guest today. And I'll let him introduce himself. But first, take it away, Bret.
What's happening, Pedro? How was your weekend, man?
Weekend was...
Hang out with the family or did you work?
I don't even know what the hell I did. What the hell? Who knows, man?
Well, over 40 and all blends into one, doesn't it? Yeah. No, I'm doing well. Just going about my week. Here to do a little crypto talk for the second time.
All right. And then I'll let my guest go ahead and introduce himself.
How you doing, Chris Paper? A local here now. I moved here a few years ago by way of San Francisco, and before that, New York. So I spent a bunch of time in finance, and the last few years I've immersed myself more into the digital assets and crypto space. So excited to be here, and thanks for inviting me on the show.
Well, you're welcome. All right, so today's show is going to be, I'd say, interesting to say the least. I will admit that I pre-recorded this show already, and we forgot to hit the volume, so we're doing it again. So sorry about the redo, guys. We're going to talk about a article, the CoinDesk, dated when? There it is, August 1st, 2023.
Last week.
And they're talking about the caption reads, DeFi died and we didn't even notice. Okay, I don't know about you guys, but I know DeFi ain't dead. So,
I think they were being sarcastic with a play on that title, but
right.
It's dead for the 600,000.
Just like Bitcoin. Bitcoin's dead for the 437th time, right?
Right. Well, basically, what I got out of the article, and I'm just kind of kick-start it here a little bit, is that the founder of the CRV token and Curve, his name is Mr. Michael Agorov. Now try to say that fast 5 times. All right, I guess my boy decided he would, hold on, we got someone trying to get up on there. All right, I guess he decided he wanted to get some liquidity out and buy real world assets. He went to Aave and basically almost caused a crash. And come running to help was Mr. Justin Sun. Hero? I don't know, don't think so. But here we go. Bret, what are your thoughts? I'll let you take it away.
Sure. Well, Justin Sun, don't things come full circle in the crypto world? Remember, he was one of the enemies with Tron, and lately he's been inserting himself into being the hero and saving different projects. First of all, I love the title of that article, but here's my overall thoughts on it, which is, from my take of reading this, the creator of Curve Coin and the Curve DeFi, a platform that was able to exchange and trade stablecoins with one another, right? So what he did was he took out a bunch of personal loans with basically Curve as collateral. And so now the position that he's put the people in who are staking and using the platform, which is he's put them in a position where they could potentially be liquidated. And so that, in a sense, exposes, I guess, a hidden truth that has always existed, but until now, people haven't really thought about or paid attention to, which is a scenario of like Celsius, where you have the actual creator of the platform make a bunch of very immature and stupid financial mistakes. And because of that, everybody who was invested in that platform had to pay and lose their money. So in a sense, what's great about DeFi to me is that all the naughtiness that bankers do and trying to hide what they're doing in reality with their finances and maneuvering money around, you can't get away with that in DeFi because everybody can see it on the blockchain. It's completely exposed if you know what you're looking for. However, in this case, the problem with that is that these were personal loans, from what my understanding is. So it's not like he took funds from the company and used, and bought things with. He had actual personal loans. So if you're taking out personal loans and you're the creator of a company and you're responsible for those personal loans to pay them back, first of all, how is anybody supposed to track that? You can't track that. These are personal loans. They're not loans that are done on the blockchain. But because of this, he's put everybody else in a position where they could potentially get liquidated. So that is just like the real world right now and legacy financing, correct? Enron, we're going to cook the books. We're going to do a bunch of loans. We're going to hide a bunch of things and not let anybody know. And so now everybody who's involved in the company has to suffer for that. So in that aspect, by doing the personal loans, he's bringing that world into it, So it just basically points out that if you have a creator of a company, when it comes to financing, DeFi, which is ironic because it's supposed to be DeFi, which basically in a sense means no humans involved, right? Which is funny because it's a human error at the end of the day that's putting the whole platform involved. So to me, that's my point. You can have crypto, you can have blockchain involved and all these different things with financing, but at the end of the day, these things are still controlled by humans, right? And you're still having humans make the decisions and pushing the decision button at the end. And because of that, you're always going to be susceptible to these human maneuvers, period.
Yep. You want to chime in or you want me to go again?
Yeah, no, I think
Paul.
sure. Yeah, no, I think that's those are great points. It's tough, and I think it gives obviously a bunch of black eyes on the crypto industry for a bunch of different reasons. Falls into that bucket. But I really think that when you're in a banking or financial institution, one of the things that's critically important is you have an asset liability management desk, and they're there to tell you that you have enough funds to create loans. So when you are missing that check and balance at these companies, it puts a kind of a black eye from an optics perspective of what's really going on at these companies. And I think that the Fed is doing a job of making examples of all of these folks in one form or fashion, or they're just doing it to themselves in times of delevering, which is what we've seen from Bitcoin going from the price of 69,000 down to 15 and coming back. That was getting as much leveraged trading out of the market as possible. And I think that was to probably set up the road to having these ETFs eventually being approved as the spot ETFs, which now you have, I think, 5 or 6 of the largest 10 asset managers applying for them. So I think you're going to see more headlines like this, people getting flushed out that have been bad actors and very greedy and thinking that they can get away with it. Folks like these, the Richard Harts of the world, they're making an example out of him with X. So,
Richard Hart, don't even get me started on that joker.
You got videos of this guy with like $10 million worth of Louis Vuitton walking out to his car and all this other stuff. And, he's a huge talking head from a social perspective, but he just has a larger bullseye on his back for doing stuff like that. And I think the Fed's going to make an example and continue to make examples of folks.
Pedro was kind of saying that before about the road of everything that's been happening, which is the road leading down to ETFs and the government stepping in. You're talking about that, weren't you, Pedro?
Yeah.
I think what's interesting is just taking a step back, of the overarching theme of what is an actual asset class and what it takes to become an asset class. It wasn't too long ago that, there was no Chinese stock market. It wasn't really until the 90s that...
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Part of, I think, a reaction to Tiananmen Square. And, do you remember the Tiananmen Square?
Yeah. So they implemented the stock market in China after that?
I think they realized that they needed to be more aligned from a global economic perspective. Doesn't mean they changed their course. But perspective.
They need to clean up their mirror image or their image.
The first 10 to 20 years of the Chinese stock markets were pretty volatile before the price elasticity started to come in and you started to see a little bit more leveling out of price levels. But let's not forget that Bitcoin in the crypto space as a whole is less than 15 years old. So, and the altcoin space is even less than that.
Yeah.
So you have to root out a lot of the folks that aren't acting with the best interest and heart of people. They may say that, but you look at the actions, not the words. So I think we're getting through that now, and I think it sets us up for better times ahead. But I just think it's something we're gonna see a lot more of these.
Well, I think their perspective, not to pick on Wendy, but I disagree. I think what she's trying to do is come up with a happy medium. She's thinking that you can go ahead and decentralize and centralize at the same time, that there has to be some give and take, and I totally disagree. I think the moment you got centralization making a play, you would no longer have decentralization. Avi, my hat's off to them because the way they set up their platform, everything on the chain is transparent. You can see everything, right? So if they decided to loan out to a very reputable guy, at least up to this point, with Curve is a great platform. His token, CRV, is a great token. The question doesn't lie in the loan, and that's where I think the mistake was made. The question lies in his decision to mine the token and then take it to a platform, get a loan on it, and then buy real world assets. Mm-hmm. That's the problem. And for me, that wasn't Ave's fault or any of the DeFi space fault, because the whole idea of DeFi is to get loans that are outside of the centralized banking system. And for them to sit there and judge that DeFi is dead is a big leap I don't think I'd take that leap. I'm not in agreement. I think if you put a fly in this ointment, the whole thing is gone. Centralization is the kiss of death for crypto as we know it. And going back on a previous podcast that we've done, twofold. One, bankers, and which you know a lot about, are scared to death of decentralization because everything is on the blockchain, as Wendy said, and we all know. But they can't do, and this is where I do agree with Wendy, they can't do their shenanigans, right? So they don't want it around. They love the blockchain technology, right? They just don't like the transparency. And so they're getting into now the tokenization that is an amazing technology that I think they're going to tokenize every real world asset and you won't have a choice. It will seem like a choice, but it won't be a choice. So as soon as they tokenize everything, then after that, it will be pretty easy to do what they want to do as far as their version of banking when we are at that stage with the CBDCs and all the like. It won't be what we're looking at the DeFi space now. It'll be, I think the DeFi space now, time is very limited. And these type of attacks are exactly what Gary and the bunch are looking for to shut them down. Period, end of story. So I'm a decentralized guy. I loved the platform when it came out. And now I'm very disappointed in seeing what the potential could have been and what they're going to do to it now. Those are my 2 and 3 cents.
I would say this. The party ain't over yet. So, like you said, the platform and the protocol that was set up for Curve and DeFi works. That's not the problem. And I never said that was the problem. I think the technology has proven itself to work, which is why bankers are scared, you know? But as far as DeFi and it being ruined or making a huge dent into it, I think just like crypto and just like Bitcoin, we're at the very beginning of a very long story. We're still halfway through the first chapter. So it's not dead. It's not over. It's just early. And mistakes are going to be made and people are figuring it out. So the platform of DeFi itself and the protocols, how it's set up, work, no doubt. However, at the end of the day, the problem is you can have DeFi and decentralized all you want. At some point or another, there's humans involved, right? Because how do you get that platform and these protocols to work and people using them? If you don't involve a human, it's just a thought in a head. So to take a thought from a head into a working business and a working protocol takes people and humans involved. So at no point is it truly decentralized. To me, the only pure form of truly decentralized for anything would be it's run and facilitated and created at every single point from AI or a machine, which I don't think we want, sure, given the orders on those things. So then you got to ask yourself, at what point is a human and centralization need to be involved, and at what point do they not be involved, right? So the platform itself, the protocol itself works. We're good to go. However, how do you get it to a massive scale? Because if anything's just done locally or in small batches, you know, it's like I always say about being a musician. Well, hey, if you don't care about being a sellout, you don't care about selling a lot of records, and stay in your basement and play a guitar by yourself for the rest of your life. But if you want to get your message out there, you want to reach as many people as you want to. And so to really have the benefits of DeFi really work and have an impact into the world, in a sense, you need humans to spread that. You need humans to adopt that and use that. So, you know, at what point is it DeFi and decentralized? And at what point do we need to work with some centralized units on this? Who knows? I mean, I still think we're very, very young, but the protocols itself work, no doubt. But at the end of the day, it's got to be run by humans at one point or another. So where's that happy medium?
Let me get there. I don't get you. So just to wrap it up, you understand, and I know you do, but for those who don't, blockchain technology and everything done through it, if you add in an oracle that will work regardless of human interaction, Matter of fact, you don't really want, after that's been programmed, you don't really want a human involved at all. So when the steps of the contract are done, so for example, if you pick up some Bitcoin, you take it to Avi and you put it up and they give you some a token and whatever you decide you want. You want a stable coin in this case, right? And you pick up your stable coin, but it's set up so if it goes under $10,000, you're immediately liquidated. And you do get a warning, and you do understand what's going on. But at the end of the day, it's no human involvement. That's why it's called decentralized, right? Now, do we need people to program it, set it up initially? But that's true of everything. But like my cell phone right here, I grabbed it, I've tweaked it the way I want it, but it's mine. I need no one else, right? So that's what the platform's about. So the platform is set up so very little human interaction. If you read Satoshi's paper on Bitcoin, which is the reason I got involved, is because they wanted to do peer-to-peer transactions without a centralized banking system that would interfere with actual trade. And the reason it's considered a commodity is because there is nothing in there that has anything to do with centralization. There's no board, right? And there's no governing bodies in any way. Now there's maintenance of the chain that goes along with it, but that wouldn't and isn't considered for the SEC. Ergo, why we have Bitcoin is the only real asset that they're considering a commodity. If you look at the previous lawsuit that XRP is celebrating, I think they're mistaken.
So do I.
I think they shouldn't be celebrating because the second tenet of that the judge found them at fault and breaking the law is to sell to investors, which takes out all the EFT possibilities. If I'm sitting in a hedge fund right now, and you could address this a little bit better, and I sit on a board and I want to invest in crypto, I can't do it with investors' money other than maybe a Bitcoin, right? Which is, I think BlackRock is trying to change it all up so it's just Bitcoin now, but that's to be seen. I don't know. I would know if I was sitting on that board, that's the only thing I would do just to get the ball rolling is I will do an EFT with just Bitcoin, and at least until this resolves itself. Now, a lot of people in the XRP community right now are excited and all that, but who's the biggest bag holder of XRP?
XRP holders.
Ripple.
Yeah.
And what are they doing?
I know.
They're selling. And why? Because they know.
It hit what, 95 cents, and now it's back down to 68 cents.
Right. And if you look at who's selling,
Hanging out, yep.
understand why they're selling. They're selling because it makes sense. They have a huge bill coming because they're not done. It ain't over. I ain't heard no fat lady sing, right? It ain't over. Right. So when this all plays itself out, guys, I really believe that Gary and boys are going to be popping champagne and I'll be very happy. And I really believe that they're going to drive out crypto, and which sucks for us in the United States because crypto ain't going anywhere. They're going just to take it out of here. And if they do it in Europe, they'll take it out of Europe. If they do it in China, they'll take it out of China. And then it'll go into some kind of black market, system. But they're still going to do it. Now, will it have mass adoption if that happens? As Bret just pointed out, don't know. I do know that anyone that's looked at Bitcoin knows that it's a good buy. And we only get in 21 million of those puppies. And so there's way more than 21 million millionaires in the United States alone. So whoever does buy Bitcoin, even for nostalgia's sake, I mean, people are paying for a 1970 Charger RS, right? They're paying almost $1 million for a car. I mean, what are they going to do when Bitcoin starts going bananas? So those are just my happy thoughts.
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. The way I always kind of looked at the narrative of Bitcoin was from a more kind of pragmatic approach. If you look at just collectibles, forget about the store of value and all the other narratives around what Bitcoin should be. You know, like you said, there's only 21 million of these things that will ever be in existence. Today, realistically, there's what, maybe like 17, 18 million?
18 million, because the 3 million in the wallet's never been moved, and we can assume at this point it probably won't.
I mean, you got lost coins, maybe some of those come back. But
17, 18 million, yeah.
Let's say 17.
17 million,
number.
okay.
You got not even 1 million wallets that are holding a whole Bitcoin, and most people who actually have Bitcoin have multiple wallets. I know myself, I don't have a ton of Bitcoin, but I have some. I probably have like 5 wallets. So imagine how many people actually
IRS
really
is listening.
do.
Just kidding.
Okay. Not financial advice. But the thing is, I mean, you're really talking about maybe a couple of 100,000 people right now that are holding a whole Bitcoin. And I think as time goes on, that digital beanie baby, store of value, all of those narratives like are going to wrap into one. And people that have made money traditionally in fiat, like the people I used to talk to all the time, my banking friends, I still talk to them, they couldn't wrap their head around why Bitcoin, why not the other 20,000 different coins that have come and gone through the past. And I think that it has the staying power. We've got almost 15 years of data now. So, you see that staying power of this. You see the climb upwards in it. You see things like what happened in Ukraine where, when Russia went in, they capped what humans could go to the bank and take out at $3,000, I think it was. Mm-hmm. So if you need to leave the country stat, $3,000 isn't going to get you and your family on a plane out of the country. So those are real life things that I try to relate this to. Is would Bitcoin be more efficient than, let's say, somebody in Ukraine had $20 million of investable assets? If they put $2 million of that into physical gold, how long is it going to take you to go and be like, well, oh shit, Russia just invaded. I need to get out of my gold. That physical gold is not held under your pillow.
Yep, that's the thing. All it is a digital certificate that says you own it.
Right.
But that's consistent upon someone giving it to you.
Right. And they might not even give you the physical gold.
Yeah.
They would just give you money.
Right? Because
exactly.
Most gold is stored in a vault and never leaves the vault.
That's right.
So that's the whole thing. So to me, and this is what I love about Bitcoin, and we discussed this in the past. Let me get the other there. There we go. To me, this is what I love about Bitcoin, and we've discussed this in the past, which is, to me, I'm very much into the philosophical point of it, right? Mm-hmm. So Bitcoin means something different to everybody, I think, who's into Bitcoin.
That's right.
It has, this characteristic of it means more of importance in you than this. And this is maybe why I don't necessarily have a problem with Bitcoin merging with traditional financing and traditional bankers, because number one, I think it's inevitable. I mean, we could be wishful thinkers of all we want about a world that exists completely decentralized. That's a bunch of bullshit to me. That's never, ever existed in history since humans together as a group and doing things as a group, we get 10 times more things done. And we've invented 10 times more things compared to before humans got together and did things individually. This is scientifically proven. But regardless, I think that's going to be inevitable regardless. But at the same point, what matters most to me about Bitcoin for the characteristic of it, I should say, the characteristic that matters most to me about Bitcoin is the limited supply. 21 million, that's it, right? So to me, what really gets me and what really pisses me off is things like governments printing money based off of nothing. We've printed, 80% of our entire money supply in the history of our country in the last 3 years. 80%. You can't do that with Bitcoin. 21 million, that's it. So to me, what matters is Bitcoin ultimately being that store of value. You start to have government fiats backed by Bitcoin, just like they used to be backed by gold. But now no country, starting with the United States in 1971, went off the gold standard. Now no country in the world their money's backed by gold. They're all government fiat money systems. Every single one of them that exist right now. It never used to be that way prior to 1971 in the history of the world. So Bitcoin, to me, if it can be adopted into the ultimate store of value that's accepted around the world, I don't care about using it for payments. I don't care about this and that. I don't care if it's intertwined with traditional financing and government fiats. It's that backing that matters most to me.
But how do we get to a point like that? And I think
very carefully. No, I'm just kidding.
Right. That's why to get to a point like that, you kind of need government adoption, right? So You've heard the rhetoric of somebody like Jamie Dimon at J.P. Morgan or Larry Fink at BlackRock, talk about as recently as 4 years ago, snake oil, it's this, it's that, vilifying it till the cows come home.
And they were buying the whole time.
Well, they were trading the futures market. Mm-hmm. Their traders were, but Jamie Dimon explicitly said if anybody that he knew of was trading Bitcoin and owned it, he would fire them because they're idiots. Yet they're trading futures, and he was aware of that, right? So, you say one thing, but the actions of what the people under you are doing speak to something else. So now Larry Fink has come around, the largest asset manager in the world. They have over $11 trillion in assets under management. And, he's singing praises about Bitcoin now and blockchain as a whole. So going back to a little bit of what you were saying before, I actually think that there are going to be a finite number of layer one protocols and some other altcoins that will survive and actually thrive, as well as Bitcoin. But it's really at the behest of, well, when I say the government, I really mean like BlackRock and JP Morgan, because let's face facts, I don't think our president is pulling the strings here. I think the money is what dictates the power, and the power is held by quite a few of the asset managers at the top of the house. There was a leaked report, I don't know if you've seen it, about BlackRock saying, I think in an optimal portfolio situation, the Bitcoin allocation can be as high as like 84%, something absurd. And I have to validate whether that's true or not, but I've heard it on multiple outlets, and I saw part of the report. And that's a very telling number. Just the fact that this guy's become a cheerleader for Bitcoin, other folks are going to follow suit eventually. But what that also tells me is when you're saying things like that publicly, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop and be like, okay, well, there's a number of entities that have applied for a spot ETF, a Bitcoin spot ETF, which is different than a futures market. In a futures market, you don't have to hold the actual inventory of the underlying assets on your balance sheet. But in essence, you have to go and hold that on your balance sheet when you're creating a spot ETF, because you're allowing people to trade real time. So you need to be able to have the inventory to...
You need to actually own it, yeah.
Right, in order to execute the trade. So that's a telling sign. And the go, no-go dates on that, I think, are spaced out into Q1 next year, somewhere around February, March, April. That's kind of interesting to me because that aligns with right around the halving event, which is sometime around April or May of next year, when Bitcoin, the rewards that are mined are half as much as they used to be. So the amount of Bitcoin that's going to be created into existence is going to be half as much, which, if there's a feverish pitch for people to want to own this, because the BlackRocks of the world are going to push it to all their folks that have retirement funds with them, then that could be like a crushing wave of wanting of a demand for Bitcoin when you have less available.
Well, it won't be very profitable though for the miners once the rewards are cut in half. So how does that impact them? Does that just equate to less miners and less competition mining, or like?
Well, I think the way to look at this whole space. One of my friends who's been a Bitcoin maxi for years, but a buddy of mine from 2015. He kind of sizes it up as it's all the fee pie. And the fee pie has a finite amount of fees around. So you're going to have survivors and you're going to have people that get absorbed, entities. And I think the Bitcoin miners fall into that, where they're just going to be absorbed over time. And the biggest players are going to scoop them up. So I'm not sure if that fully answers the question.
No.
But I think it's, you're going
listen,
towards that.
Cat's capitalism, right? Yeah. That happens every day, which is, what was it? When the automobile first came out in America, there were over 1,100 car companies. Now there's 3.
Right. Exactly. So that's where we're at right now, and I think we're going to see, there's a lot of watered down stuff. I think we're going to drive towards more meaningful, useful projects that Wall Street has a fixed eye on right now. But it takes time to build out the plumbing in the back, and that's why there's been a lot of kind of hand arm length distance of, yeah, we want this or we don't want it, and the rhetoric kind of switches back and forth. And mostly right now we're seeing a lot of resistance to it, and this threat of like kicking crypto out and offshore pretty much. But that always tells me is that really going to happen? Do we really want to kick that innovation that comes with their bad actors? That there's a few bad actors. There's a bunch of there's a few bad projects, but in that there's a lot of people that want to change the world and create things and innovate. And I hate to say the cliche, but throw the baby out with the bathwater. Do we really want to do that? I don't know. I think that there's something more to Bitcoin and a number of these altcoins. And I think that the government, it seems to me that they want to maybe take another look at it. So even though the rhetoric from a public perspective is, hey, like this is kind of, we need to take a closer look. This is kind of garbage. This guy's a bad actor. That guy's a bad actor. Like you said, the integrity of a lot of these protocols that were built in the spirit of what they were built and why they were built, I think that's not the question. It's the people that are behind it. And once we flesh out who really wants to build in a high integrity manner, I think that those folks will be able, some of them, to come through the door. But it's going to start with Bitcoin.
All right, so let me answer both of you two. All right. Number one, I disagree, Brett. Number one, you can't have centralization and decentralization working in Bitcoin. The moment that happens, Bitcoin's toast. All right. There will never be a merging or a conversion.
There already is centralization.
No, there isn't. There isn't.
The 3 biggest Bitcoin miners.
No.
3.
There isn't. There's no centralization right now. If we're talking Bitcoin, if you're talking miners and what they're getting paid and how they're getting their money, that's another thing. I'm talking about Bitcoin, the use case of Bitcoin. There is none. Okay. The moment that happens, it's toast. It's one of the reasons, and allow me to elaborate. That's one of the reasons why Wall Street is really liking Bitcoin. because they see the value, right? But I think that's an aside. I think they're fearful of it, all right, because they could see the devastation it could put on all the controlled Federal Reserve banks globally. It could be a very big deal for them. So they need to control it and own it. Now, going back to Diamond, all right, hello. That boy was trading silver and gold, suppressing prices, looking the other way, and they just paid a few $100 million fine because of the shenanigans that they were doing. So when that boy opens his mouth, I do opposite. It's kind of like the
Jim Cramer.
Jim Cramer. There's actually Twitter accounts.
We agree on that, brother.
He said this, and I'll do that. All right, no. So I don't trust that guy. Now, as far as BlackRock getting involved in the game, well, they better do something, because right now there's not a lot of happy campers, because what they did in the real estate space is coming back to bite them. They got kicked out of single families. They've gone into commercial. And there are some people lining up at the door saying, we want our money back. And they're saying, no, not right now. So they need to come up in their little bag of tricks, another way to get profitable again and be able to pay back all the investors, or they're going to have a major run next year, right? So what's going to happen with the ETF? Well, let's just say that it's a club and we ain't in it. Okay, so if you and I were to apply for that, we would not get approved. Sure. But right, but who would? Yeah. BlackRock, okay, $1 trillion company, they would.
Legacy systems.
Yeah, so I think there is something to be had, something to be said. As far as the conspiracy around that, what happens when they can control over 51% and all those things that could happen if something that big were to happen, right? If they started to control that and were able to make changes, that's some spooky stuff. Right. That's not for this podcast right now.
Yeah, right? That's a whole...
Yeah, so let's hope that we have enough adoption that we can keep out of the hands of these bankers Bitcoin. Because really, Chris, I will really agree with you that the technology that is coming on, the innovation that is happening right now is such a bright spot in our world. There are numerous amounts of beautiful things that could come out of this type of technology, and mixed in with the AI and everything else that's coming on, they could really better us as a species, right? And where we can do things at the speed of light. And when we started the show, you had mentioned something I need to address real quick, and then I'll give you the floor. But basically what you said was the use case of Bitcoin, right? What is it? Well, I always loved this example because I've lived this example myself. I've traveled Europe and I've watched these guys get shaken down right in front of me. I mean, literally, I hate to use the word Gestapo, but I'll use it. I mean, going on a train from Paris to Rome, you have these guys come up and they're like, well, we need to know how much money you have. And so they're traveling and they're like, well, I have $5,000, I have $10,000, whatever. And it depends what their mood is that day, right? But usually if you have a lot of money, it's all of a sudden confiscated, right? So a scenario would play out if you had to take your family out of the country and you had 10,000 cash, because that's the agreed upon limit you can take out with no questions asked. Try that on a train. Good luck. Right. Yeah, that's gone. All right. And then, $10,000 or just under $10,000 in gold in your pocket, which is a little heavy, right? And then you have in your glasses a USB port, right? Or a wallet, whatever. And in your mind, you have all the key codes. And so they come to you and they say, do you have anything on you? And you say, yes, sir. Here's 10,000. Here's my gold pieces. And they say, we're going to confiscate that in the name of our country. Yes, sir. You show up at your next stop. You hit the nearest terminal. 20 minutes later, would you agree about 20 minutes later? You have enough to keep going. Right. And that is the beauty of Bitcoin and the technology in cryptocurrency, right? And that is keeping out the shady elements even within our own government. And what is going on with all these senators and all these people making all of this money that's, it's questionable at best. Well, with this type of technology in play, we can see everything on the chain, right? So the transparency is even going to be greater down the road.
Yeah, no, I kind of see almost like a hybrid approach. I agree with part of what you're saying. I think that in order for price appreciation, we need more mass adoption. And I think that the financial institutions, that's where they come into play. They want to custodize these assets because they want to be able to make markets in them and make their VIG, right, their spreads. And they can do that if they vilify it enough to a point where they can either get in cheap enough while simultaneously laying the groundwork for regulatory reform. So I kind of see eventually some sort of a model where maybe like half of the Bitcoin are in the etherverse somewhere throughout the cosmos, and the other half are custodized by financial institutions that they're using to potentially, what's interesting to me is when I was, in banking, often I would deal with large entities that were international. So to do transactions, like let's say you're going to do a US dollar Korean won transaction, but like on a large scale, like, millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, that takes like 3 days to settle that trade. You're sending it over, the funds have to be cited wherever they're being remitted to, somewhere in Korea, valid side of the funds, then you make the transaction and everything's good to go. But it takes 3 days. So what are the banks and the financial institutions doing that whole time? Are they holding it? Are they sweeping those funds overnight to make incremental yield on it before they allow the transaction to go through? So they're making money off of you sending that money over there. Mm-hmm. On top of the fee, they're actually taking those funds overnight and making that incremental yield. So it's like a double fee they're making. So it's kind of interesting to me that when I left banking, I found out that there was a consortium of 30 banks that were working with Ripple. So to me, that validated blockchain as a whole, that banks were looking more closely at this. And this was probably about 6-7 years ago now. So now that the cat's out of the bag in a little bit more of a public fashion, I can see this as something, why wouldn't they use something like a Bitcoin or maybe even a Ripple or some other digital asset to take the place? So now instead of having that T+3, you can settle transactions within a day. Now you can make chunkier fees to do that because it's more efficient for folks.
The only thing that's going to, right now, Bitcoin's price does fluctuate quite a bit, right? Number one, that's human involvement. But number two, what will bring about, if you bring about mass adoption, you're going to have stabilization of that, right? That's what mass adoption does, is it stabilizes things. So the quicker that we can get the mass adoption, to me, the quicker that the price of Bitcoin is going to be a lot more stabilized. The market will still dictate the price, but the huge fluctuation in it will be a lot more stable when we have increased mass adoption. What's going to bring mass adoption is people and government involvement. I think that's going to bring us the quickest. So to me, it's that double-edged sword. If you don't want to have BlackRock and Jamie Dimon control the price of Bitcoin, the only way to counter that is to have it adopted by people in general, right?
That's right.
And so the quickest way to get mass adoption is through human interaction. 100%. I think it's in the greater good of Bitcoin. And number two, that's the other quality of Bitcoin that's almost as important to me as a limited supply of 21 million, is cross-border, right? So like Pedro was mentioning, Bitcoin is worth the same in every single country that you go to. So my example of that is, what if you're living in Afghanistan, if you've been there for the past 20 years, and all of a sudden you know that the Taliban's going to start moving back in? Obviously, you want to leave Afghanistan and you don't want to be there anymore. So like Pedro's example, what are you going to do? You're going to take your bags full, a suitcase full of Afghan money, and you're going to go to the next border where it's worth nothing, or you're going to get robbed, right? So you can have $1 million in Bitcoin or even $5,000 in Bitcoin that's on your cell phone, that's in your back pocket, and it's worth exactly the same every single country that you go to, right, and you can't get robbed from it, period.
One Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin.
One Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin everywhere in the world. And just the facilitation of the transfer of value that's not going down is a use case itself.
Right.
Combine that with the limited supply.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree and echo those sentiments. Cross-border payments are a big thing, and you look at a place like Switzerland. Right now, there's almost 200 places that accept Bitcoin as a form of payment. What happens when it goes to 1,000? I mean, you could retire in Switzerland with a tiny USB port, right? Your cold storage wallet, you can carry that around with you everywhere, and that's it. Yeah. That's it. You want coffee? That's it. Flake off a piece of the digital gold of the next century, which is Bitcoin. But yeah, no, I think that you're right. The price elasticity comes in as more and more people adopt Bitcoin, as well as any other cryptocurrency. It's just human nature how it works. So I think that we've started to see that. An interesting point is there's about 70% of the coins that are out there right now, Bitcoin that's available, haven't moved in over a year. So long-term hodlers are continuing to hodl basically as long as they can. That's interesting.
That's a very interesting fact because Bitcoin went from 69,000 down to 15,000 and now it's hovering around what, 29 or 30,000? And the whole time, that's in the period of a year and a half.
Right.
And that whole time, even when it went from 69,000 down to 15,000, 70% of the people never sold it. They still held on to it.
But I think there's enough loose threads around that to know that there were some Wall Street folks playing some games, knowing what was going on.
Yeah.
They knew that the markets were over levered, and it was time to like squash the
Yeah.
price. And they did a fantastic job of doing that, basically.
Mission accomplished.
Right. So, the interesting thing is, though, when you only have 70% of the Bitcoin or 70% held, you only have 30% float out there, the price levels become thinner and thinner and thinner. So if you follow that logic, and let's say it even goes down to 65 to 60% of the coins are held by next year during the halving event, that's still not a ton of float, and you're going to have half as many Bitcoin mined into existence due to the rewards being halved in the halving event. So you're talking about price levels that could be pretty tremendous, where you buy a few at one, and then you might have to pay 500 to another $1,000 to get to another price level. So it can blow through numbers pretty quickly. We've seen it in the past. And I think you're only going to see it in a little bit more sizable fashion going forward as we move on in time.
Okay. Well, here's a couple of things I wanted to bring up, and I found them. You guys know who Christina Campbell is? Former U.S. Treasurer, joins Ripple board. You guys know who that is?
I know of her, yeah.
Okay.
Now I do.
All right. Well, she was the treasurer of the United States. When was she treasurer of the United States? She was the treasurer of the United States
2005?
May 3rd, 2016. That's, former treasurer of the United States speaks at the annual Milcom Institute conference in Beverly Hills, California, May 3rd. Blockchain startup Ripple said Tuesday as former U.S. Treasurer Rosie joins the board, battles lawsuit, yada, yada, yada. Okay? Well, so put the pieces together, right? What happened just recently with Ripple? We're not talking XRP. We're talking Ripple. Okay, they just got voted in to start doing settlements. That just happened. Okay, so let me ask you: you've got government, but where did she work before this?
I don't know. Where did she work?
The government.
No, before the government. I don't know.
Before the government. Okay, hold on. I think, and let me just look her up. Give me 1 second. So she has ties. So let's go back. So Christine Campbell, the chief financial officer of Ripple, has financial ties, banking ties to Citi, to Saybrook Capital. So all I'm saying is Ripple runs deep in the financial communities.
That's right.
And them being now used to settle cross-border transactions, right? But why do they want it? They want it because it's cheap for them and they can add their fees on top. That's why they want it. It's sense to be able to do it, and then to throw a garbage fee right on top of that for their whatever, easy to do. Well, I get you. I figured this would ruffle your banking ties a little bit. That's why I kind of brought it up.
No, that's a great point. And what that threads into, exactly to your point, is these guys have been, at least 30 banks, right? A consortium has been working with Ripple since 2015, 16. So there's a lot of roadway already there that's been kind of thrown down. The banks have been able to put their imprint on what they'd like to see, and the folks at Ripple, I think, have worked with them to get to a point where they can work together. So it makes a ton of sense that they'd be adopting them in a meaningful way in abundance, especially with the cross-border aspect.
Or you can maybe say, they knew about this technology, and the reason they threw them under the bus and had them get whitewashed was because now no one can say anything. Oh,
Sure.
XRP has already gone through the SEC. Everything's fine. Look at it. How is the easiest way to clean up Ripple is to throw them under the bus, have them go through all this.
Get your fines out of the way, and you come out the other side. Every bank has been fined to and from the moon. The bank that I worked at, they were fined twice. So, almost $1 billion in fine. Okay. So some of the institutions, that I've worked at in the past, they were fined up to $1 billion. So almost every financial institution gets dinged at some point or another. You take the lumps, your stock price takes a hit, And then a few months later, people have kind of forgotten about it.
Cost of doing business.
Cost of doing business, right? So if you have enough of a war chest, which Ripple has always been notorious for having, a war chest of cash at their disposal, you can get through a lot of this stuff. So we'll see how this goes, but it seems, I'd be more inclined to think, obviously not financial advice, that they're going to be successful as a viable entity going forward just because of who's in their corner.
Right. But then that takes me to my little conspiracy. I don't think XRP is going to join the party.
I don't either.
You think they're like the first one through the door?
No.
Or
I think they're going to be axed out. Here's why. Why does Ripple need XRP?
it doesn't.
They don't.
Right.
So I don't see XRP going anywhere.
Sure.
Especially because they're going to have a get out of free jail card because they will not be able to do EFTs. So they're going to say, you know what? We're going to buy you out. We're going to go bankrupt that part of the business, whatever. So all of a sudden you own 1 million XRP as an example, and you're hoping it goes to $5. Now you can retire. Then all of a sudden front page news comes out that Ripple has decided to eliminate the coin because of this, but don't worry, we're going to give you what's fair market value right after a dump. So now you're going to get 0.00001 of a cent, right? I mean, what's going to happen there? I don't know. But this is so suspicious to me.
So that's a great point that you don't necessarily, it's kind of part and parcel. You don't need, XRP and Ripple are two separate things, right? And you don't need necessarily XRP to do cross-border, using any of the technology that Ripple has underlying that. So yeah, they could just let that part of the business fail, go to zero, and then still be a viable entity going forward that works with the banks pushing through whatever it is they're pushing through.
Right.
So
well, let me give it to for the final because we're already over.
Yeah.
All right, and then go ahead and give your final.
To me, it's really simple. Why would banks pay another blockchain's fees to use it?
Right.
It doesn't make sense. So they're either going to do something to buy out Ripple or bankrupt Ripple and then get the technology for it, or invent or take the technology from it, come up with their own blockchain and use their own blockchain. Because why would they pay someone else's blockchain's fees when they can just create their own? That's not very financially smart of them, and they're a bank. Real simple.
All right. Well, let me.
Sorry, Ripple Army.
Yeah. Well, hey, you know what? I'm not sorry.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to say anything bad against them, right? I'm just, if anything, we're helping you.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, why get mad at me? Sell your bag, dude. Give it to someone else. But here's the wrap up on my little thing here. XRP, I can understand the cheerleading behind it. All right. But business is ruthless. Mm-hmm. And Ripple, if they come out of this, they're going to be like a shining star, man. And they're going to look at their portfolio and they're going to see they're going to either want to buy back all of the coins, or they're just going to cut them off. I don't know what's going to happen, but I could tell you what, all these contracts are written with the banks. They're not written with the XRP token. They're written with the corporation, the company that is Ripple, and whatever bank they're dealing with. So here you go.
Yeah.
So they're not a public company. But if they become public, right, and that they have this little problem child, which is a token that they can't sell to investors anyways, what do you think is going to happen to that token? Thank you for coming to our little show. Thank you, Chris, for joining the show. Thank you, Brett. And that is it, folks.